Hello, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Star Vista Parent Caregiver Education Workshop, Setting Healthy Boundaries at Home. My name is Alice, and I work with the San Mateo County Libraries. San Mateo County Libraries strengthen our community by creating an inclusive environment for learning. And while we can't meet together in person right now, we hope that these collaborative workshops will continue to foster community among families during this unprecedented time. So thank you for being a part of that community. This program will be recorded and shared through various San Mateo County Libraries outlets, including third-party websites like YouTube or Facebook, so others can learn from this engaging experience at a later time. You will not appear on video, and you will have the option to remain anonymous or sign in with a nickname. But don't worry, you can still interact using the chat and the Q&A functions. So we are really thrilled to be partnering with Star Vista, which is a nonprofit organization that has been helping people throughout San Mateo County navigate life's challenges for over 50 years. Their counseling, crisis prevention, youth housing, and outreach programs reach tens of thousands of people in our community each year. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter this evening, Stephanie Ballon. And Stephanie, I think you may be muted.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Alice, for that warm introduction. Again, my name is Stephanie Ballon. Pronouns are she, her, and I am a mental health clinician with Star Vista, particularly the Child and Parent Services Program, the CAPS program. So I will go ahead and share screen now. So if you can, second. There we go. Okay, I just also want to thank Alicia and the San Mateo County Library team for welcoming us back. Just again, to let you know, the way the structure is offered is a 30-minute presentation on information about positive discipline, and then the last 15 minutes will be a Q&A session. So feel free to utilize the QA options. So welcome everyone that's here. This is a workshop for parents and caregivers establishing healthy and clear limits that supports your children's growth and development. We already figured out who we are through Alicia's introduction. I'd like to share some objectives that we will be focusing on. So the point is that we want to really just gather as a community of parents and caregivers. Typically, we'd be able to be in person, and lean on the wisdom of the folks that are in the room. But unfortunately, we have to do this virtually. And then we will be reviewing some concepts of positive parenting and sharing some skill building. And it's also about learning how these guidelines work or don't work, and what gets in the way, and how to be flexible about that. So before we begin, I'd like to just preface this by saying that this is not a one-size-fits-all presentation. Like, I'm the only expert in my own personal experience and sharing knowledge that I've learned when I've worked with families, and this seems to have resonated with folks. These are just potential guidelines, so think of this as an opportunity to build your own toolkit, try out different things, and really think about culturally, how this impacts your discipline styles. So here I have a slide around culture and communication. And the reason why we want to start with this is because there are so many different types of styles of communication, which is shaped by our culture. And culture meaning not just language, but we're talking about gender, religion, spirituality, and even within the family, there are ways that folks have their own culture that's formulated. So, just again, to consider that every family is different in how they communicate culturally and ethnically. And an example is like here we talk about the notion of eye contact. And in some cultures, it's not necessarily respectful to have eye contact, but in the US, eye contact is considered a form of communicating attention. So there's a difference depending on your cultural lens between individualistic values and collectivist values. As a second generation Filipino American, and I'm US born and a parent, that resonates very deeply with me because there is a difference between, considering like how you interact with your parents versus how you interact with, like, let's just say the school system, right? And then the last bullet point, these tips, okay, there's a possibility, just want to let you know that this might not fit with your culture, and just wanted to leave it open for folks to share that if there are different ways that resonate with you that have not been named, please feel free to share, and we can talk about that in the QA segment. There we go. So this slide is a representative of different styles of parenting. So one thing that we try to encourage is to understand, have the parents understand where do you lie in terms of your parenting style. And this by no means is a be all say all. This is just a representation of like where you might be in different points of interacting with your children. You may lean towards more authoritative at one point, or maybe more permissive. But I just like to review quickly that permissive is just a little bit more giving the child more autonomy, and it says quote unquote you're the boss, so giving them more power in the relationship and more lenient, so there's lower expectations. If you move to the second quadrant upwards to the right, authoritative is more about the opposite, right? Just maybe not necessarily the opposite, but a combination of being democratic and also authoritative. They're flexible, but then they're assertive. If you go down to the lower right-hand quadrant, authoritarian is, I would say, more on the extreme version of parenting styles. And then you'll see it says, because I said so, quote unquote. And so there are clear rules, and there's a very structured environment in which you're operating in. And so the left bottom quadrant is considered uninvolved. And so there are no right or wrong ways of parenting styles. And again, this is all dependent on your upbringing, your cultural background. But we will say that at some point, if there's a moment of being longitudinal time of being uninvolved, that might be problematic. So that means that you're not as communicative and present to being in relation to your child. This is a test that we highly suggest you consider taking. It's through psychcentral.com, and it evaluates your parenting style. This is a great way to understand how, the relationship between, how you were brought up and, currently how you've passed that down and relate to your own child. And then we also propose a challenge to take this test with your partner or your husband or another caregiver, to assess, what are the ways that you're similar or different in terms of how you parent. So it's assessing yourself, and it's opening dialogue with your partner, talking about values and your upbringing and what's important to you. But there's no absolute. So we encourage you, if you are interested, to reach out to a therapist or a pediatrician or parent groups to process this. Parenting style and communication. So we had talked about culture and communication. So parenting style and communication is definitely interrelated. And as we shown in the diagram, the authoritarian style of parenting would sound something like, because I told you so. And again, that resonates with me as growing up in a traditional Roman Catholic household. This was considered the norm, and it's not good or bad. It's just really what we've come to understand in terms of like what we will be as parents, or show up as parents for our children. So the one thing I just want to point out about this slide is that language or communication is primarily nonverbal. So over 90% of how we communicate is through body language and how we look at someone. And so this is something just to be conscious of when you are interacting with your child, that they are, while you may not be verbally saying anything, they may be picking up on your nonverbal cues. Development is one thing that we try to consider in terms of like, because this is not specific to any particular stage of development, but we pointed out these 3 areas because we think that it can help us see how we interact with our children in a way that's responsive. So just to mention here that the 0 to 5 years are the most formative years. And so while if you're a parent coming in and you have a child that's 2 years old, or maybe like a teenager, 0 to 5 can somewhat show the blueprint of how the child will respond as they get older. So just to understand also that children are learning at a different pace. They have different ways that they express their feelings. And it's very typical that they may be struggling to cope with how they communicate their needs. And then lastly, this is one of the most significant ones that we found to process, is that talking with your children about their feelings. And again, culturally, that may not be as relevant, or not, I want to say relevant, but as common, but to be able to model the ways that you can express your feelings and your stress in a healthy way. So the example here is, I'm going to take deep breaths because I'm upset and I'll be right back. So it's walking them through the process of, that you're feeling a certain way and you're naming it. And again, this will vary in terms of the stages of development. I also want to name the backdrop. So currently we're going through a very challenging and unprecedented time. And we wanted to name that there are certain stressors that are affecting the ways that we discipline our children with, in terms of like having everyone within the home and doing distance learning, helping them with homework, especially with the air quality, with the wildfires. There's been restrictions on ways that we can, hang out outside. And then there's jobs and financial stress. So we just encourage you to think about like doing the best that you can. And sometimes your best will look different from day to day. So we're hoping that you can practice some level of compassion and patience for yourself, because it's a really difficult situation and you're doing your best. We also want to emphasize that there are so many differences in terms of learning styles. When you think about even just being neurodivergent versus neurotypical, neurodivergent means that you have just a different way of processing information. You need a different level of stimulation. Sometimes this is noted as having being diagnosed with ADD. And then there's neurotypical, which, you know, there are ways that are, again, different from learning from others. And then just knowing that like parents and caregivers have the knowledge of what doesn't work and what works for your family. We want to lean on the idea that you are the expert and you know your children best. So here are some guides to how to parent that I will review. There's so much literature out there that talks about how to parent. So these are just a few suggestions. And again, just to reiterate that, you know, please be kind to yourself and remember that you're the expert, and and you have a history of being with your child and what works and doesn't work. So what are some strategies for positive discipline? So this is a resource called Positive Solutions for Families. And while I'm not able to review all of these 8 tips, I'd like to talk about a few of them because we're very limited on time. And one of them is understanding behaviors. So behaviors, what are they? You know, what are they telling us? And the most basic way of understanding behavior is that it's a form of communication, right? And that there is really no bad, quote unquote, bad child, but, you know, quote unquote, bad behaviors. But the behaviors can be modified and can change with age. So the important thing to consider is that we can separate the child or the person from the behavior. Offering options. So we like to, considering that not everybody has the capacity to make decisions developmentally. If you're thinking about a 2-year-old versus a 13-year-old, I mean, that's very apparent that they have different cognitive capacities to process, you know, how to make a choice. And so it's just thinking of creative ways to offer them a way to develop a sense of autonomy and also honoring, you know, because you'll need to be able to get through the day and have them make a decision. So giving them a choice of either or, like 1 or 2 decisions. And thirdly, taking responsibility and providing support. So understanding that this takes a lot of support and patience on your end, and a lot of practice. Roles and routines. So managing expectations, and this is not just for the child, but also for the parent, and trying to be realistic and clear about that. And an example I can think of is, you know, for my son, for example, like he obviously is not able to wash the dishes or put away. He is 3 years old. He can't wash the dishes or necessarily put his dishes in the sink the way I would hope he could. But maybe one thing I can offer to him is, you know, when he's done eating, he can take his plate and walk me to the sink, and then we could put it together in the sink. Planning ahead. So planning ahead, this reminds me of, again, when we're in a situation, or as the parent, you're in a situation where your child, and again, this is varies, developmentally, but I'm thinking about my child who's 3 years old. He has nap time. And so I would ensure that when we are planning to go out, that we are considering that he's tired at certain times, which this is probably something you all know already. And so again, this is just an opportunity to build upon what you already know. And then the other thing that seems to work, or parents have tried out, is a clock or a timer. If you're trying to get them out of the door, like, ensuring that, you have X amount of time to get them ready for school, or whatever occasion it is. And so that gives you an opportunity to allow them to make that decision to get ready, and it's just some buffer time. And this is a chance to also build self-esteem and other life skills. Love and affection. So this is probably one of the major conversations we've had with parents about, how do we, connect with our children, and the ways sometimes, like, how often are you honoring and recognizing their positive behaviors? So when you see that, like, trying to encourage them in the moment. So finding those moments of, where they felt like they have the agency, or were able to complete something, or were able to get dressed, in the morning. Those are the types of things that we consider as positive behaviors. And then patience with negative behaviors. So with positive discipline, we're focusing on positive reinforcement, and they're still learning, and there's different different paces of learning and styles of learning. So just trying to be understanding of the style and pace that they operate at. And compassion with the learning process, just the same. And modeling. So modeling is one of the elements of parenting that we discuss, and that, the ways that you interact with other people in your household can have an effect on how they demonstrate love and affection and connectivity. So one of the questions in our groups when we've done this presentation before is, can my children do chores even though I'm using a positive parenting model? And the answer is yes. So here is an example of a chart that we've distributed to families that's age appropriate. While looking at this, I also, again, want to consider the spectrum of learning, and that there are folks that, process information differently. So this is not a be-all information here. And when I look at ages 2 to 3, it's going to vary. So it's not going to look the same as someone who's a teenager. You can't expect a 3-year-old to, clean the garbage. So just being aware of their capacity and their ability to do the chores, so that they feel like there's a level of efficacy, and that they are accomplishing something. Because if there's too much of a higher expectation, then that also can lead to lower self-esteem. I'd like to now share with you this video that demonstrates an example of how to, or different, a parenting style. And so just a chance for you to also to think about, like, what style of parenting do you think this demonstrates? And so, the point of this is just trying to understand, how we can leave room for our child's own creative sensibility to problem solve. So trusting in the process, and, perhaps even checking your own inventory of fears and beliefs, being afraid of water in this situation. And then also just thinking about, what's your sense of safety, because it's different for everyone. It can look like, arm's length or line of sight, but it varies. And just to honor that, depending on your experiences and cultural background, that is shapes the way that you understand your sense of safety. So and the other piece of this is just praise and recognition, encouraging. You saw in this video that the little baby bird was excited, and the mama bird was recognizing and encouraging their behavior. So to focus on the positive behavior and not the negative behavior. I know we're almost out of time here. I just wanted to offer some additional resources. Positivediscipline.com, positivediscipline.org. And then this one book that we use quite often with our families, How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. This is for ages 2 to 7. If you're thinking about, what do they offer for teens, these are a few books that we consider helpful. The 5 Love Languages of Teenagers, Positive Discipline for Teenagers. And then just a reminder that you are not alone. This is a very challenging time. Like I said earlier, it's very unprecedented. And feel free, to reach out to your teachers, the principal, or the crisis center, or your mental health support for other ways of working with your children. Here are some community resources for financial assistance. We have Samaritan House. Local food banks, we have Second Harvest Food Bank, the number 650-610-0800. For the Parent Support and Crisis Line, number 650-579-0305. And then for any challenges with domestic violence, we have Cora that offers emergency shelter, therapy, and legal support. And the number is, 650-653-0800. Here is also another sheet of information that will be provided on the San Mateo County Library website that includes helpful tips for parents. And thank you. So your feedback is valuable to help us figure out the content of these workshops. So please, after we do the QA, take a few minutes to fill out the survey, and you'll find that in the Zoom chat link. Thank you.
And Stephanie, we've lost your video, but I think we have some questions. There you are. All right, we have a few questions for you. So the first one is it common for most parents to model their style from their own mother or father?
It's a very good question, and yes, and that's why we had encouraged you to think about the ways that you were brought up and what was happening in the home, because that can be translated and transmitted down the ancestral line. When you're around it growing up, then the chances are that you may be passing it down to your children if you're not aware. Yeah.
All right. And the next one is a question I really like. Could reading picture books about feelings to a child help in their development?
Oh, of course. Yes, and that's one of the tools in our toolkit that we offer for our parents. We have a list of books that encourage naming strong and big feelings like anger. And again, it's like, I like that question because it's talking about how to meet the child where they are developmentally, and using imagery and even movies, I would say. Like, so any of their favorite movies using those characters, yeah, to demonstrate like how they deal with anger.
And I would add that not just reading the book, but talking about what you're seeing in the book is a great way with any book really. But if you're looking at feelings, talking about the feelings you see and how the characters deal with it. So using them to create a bigger conversation.
Definitely.
All right. The next question is, how can you set healthy boundary between advocating for your child without hindering them to speak for themselves, especially with a child who struggles with talking about himself?
Wow, that's a very insightful question, because it's talking about balance. I mean, setting healthy boundaries. I mean, advocating for your child. I'd like to hear more about, I guess, from the person to like, in terms of advocating for your child, like in what context. But I guess what I'm gathering is that you want them to, you would hope that they would have a voice, right? And practicing that voice to self-advocate, and that is an ongoing practice, I'd say. And depending on the situation, I'm not it depends on the child as well in terms of their comfort level of speaking out, because every child has a different personality. They may be more introverted or extroverted, so it's just kind of assessing where they are in terms of where their voice capacity of their voice is, and starting there. So it really varies. I can't, I'm sorry, I can't have a hard yes or no answer for this, but yeah, it's going to be an ongoing conversation with your child about what's comfortable for them to use their voice.
There was a follow-up from that person, definitely wanting them to learn to speak up and self-advocate, but at the same time, let them know that you're supporting them without giving that suck it up kind of mentality.
Yes. So speaking up for themselves, like giving them the agency to be able to be in a situation by themselves, especially in school, considering there's how prevalent bullying is what's coming up for me. So yeah, I would say it's like building, planting seeds, like building their self-esteem and confidence to be able to use their voice.
And then the next question, and please feel free to keep typing questions in the Q&A or chat. We have definitely a few more minutes. Next one was, how do you encourage other caregivers, grandparents, etc., to support and also model your parenting style so it isn't inconsistent or confusing for kiddos?
Wow, that's a big question. It's a really big question, because earlier when I talked about culture and communication and the varying ways that folks have dealt with conflict and struggle, it varies intergenerationally. And I would say that it starts with having, small conversations with those caregivers. They may not be as receptive. I think you would I think you would know them best to know what they would be willing to receive or not, in terms of you being the expert as a parent for your child. But I'm thinking also collectively, it takes a village, right? And we want to honor the different ways that, like I say, a grandparent has passed down certain parenting styles or values and beliefs. So it's a fine balance. Again, I don't have a hard yes or no answer for this, but I would encourage thinking about, being curious, understanding their stories and how they've come to these belief systems, so that maybe you can have an open conversation about how to merge the two.
And then there's another question. How can I set boundaries without being perceived as the bad guy? Because there are things that are not optional, like doing homework on time.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. It's
Okay.
in the chat too, if you want to. How can I set boundaries without being perceived as the quote unquote bad guy? because there are things that aren't optional, like doing homework on time.
You know, I would say, again, that's a hard one, because as a parent, I can see that you're really just trying to set routines and you know, have a certain level of discipline for, especially with school. So being the, I mean, quote unquote bad guy, I maybe would reframe that and say that you're doing the best you can as a parent to offer the support that they need to do well in school. You know, setting boundaries doesn't necessarily equate to being the bad guy. Maybe in their eyes, because they don't want to do it. But I'm guessing that there's not an easy answer for this either, because they may not like that you're setting limitations and boundaries.
And then somebody asked if it's possible to share the slide before last again. I think we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm actually going to share in the chat. We're going to make the recording of this available and some of the resource lists available on our website. So I've just shared that in the chat, and you can go to that link. It'll take a day or two to upload the recording of this presentation. And then someone did share that they really love the phrase they learned, small body, big feelings, when it comes to understanding emotional development in young children. That even though they're little, they feel a lot.
Oh, as adults, I would say that resonates strongly as well. We're all learning, so yeah.
And the resource list will also have a PDF of the slides, by the way. So all of the resources that were showed tonight will be available at that link I just posted.
Along with the link to the short film as well, right? Yes.
And then I'm going to share one more time the link for a feedback survey for us. I think we have a couple more minutes if anyone has any last minute burning questions. All right. Well, thank you again for, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And again, before you go, if you can take a minute to complete the survey that I posted in the chat there. We'd really love to hear what worked for you and what didn't, and if there are any topics you want us to feature in the future. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for this. I learned a lot from you too.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, and thank you for all the parents that are present. I mean, this is just a step. I mean, you're doing the work, so we appreciate you being present. Yeah.
And again, I wanted to say this is the second in a series of parent caregiver education workshops that are being led by Star Vista. So again, this workshop was recorded and it'll be available on our YouTube channel, and there will be a link to that in that link that I shared in the chat. And so if you're interested in attending future workshops in the series, you can visit our website at that link I shared again and join for those as well. So thank you again so much and have a great night.